Thanks so much everyone for understanding. It's great that we've actually got a capacity room, which is exciting for both of us. So thanks for coming for today's session, sharing the secrets of impactful mapping with my colleague Balqis Mazuir and myself, Sam Bark. As I said, it's great to have a full capacity room and everyone's got their webcams on. It feels very surreal to have an in-person event. So let's dive into today's session. We're going to be talking about cartography, and in particular, we're going to be talking about the cartographic principles. Now, in prep for this session, Balqis and I came together to think about the different considerations you need to make when designing a map, and we came up with a list of 5 things. So that is simplicity, base maps, color, composition, and audience. Now, there's no hard and fast rule on how you apply each of these principles, but what I'm going to do in the first half of today's session is just run you through a bit of an introduction and how you might think about these things in the design process. In the second half of today's session, I'm going to hand over to Balqis, and she's going to show them all in action with a really amazing demo and definitely steal the spotlight for today. So that's today's session. Let's dive into the first principle, and that is simplicity. Now, you've all heard of the phrase, less is more. And for me, that is one of my golden rules of cartography. When it comes to designing your map, you really need to think about what is absolutely essential to include on your map. Now, that can be anything from the base map, the data itself, or even the title, legend, and that compass that sits in the corner. So it's really important to think about, whether the audience is going to need that information. A good example of this is this map here, which is showing trees, and that's literally it. There is a dot on the map, a green dot on the map that represents a tree, but there's actually nothing else to it. There's no base map, there's no roads, rivers, title, legend. And what I love about the simplicity in this one is it allows the data to just speak for itself. You can kind of identify the patterns and trends based on just the data on itself. So hopefully that shows you the importance of simplicity in kind of giving that data room to tell the story. Moving on to base maps. So maps are in essence defined by their base maps. And you can see here, it's an opportunity to draw focus to the data that sits on top of it. If it's designed correctly, it can provide the right amount of relevant information to support your data and the story that you're trying to tell. And this can be, as I said, anything from the roads, the rivers, the color of each of the element on your base map. However, it can quite easily go the opposite direction. So you can include far too much information and make the river bright pink, and it actually distracts the audience from the story that you're trying to tell, and you can't really understand what the data is showing. So to design my base map, I use a vector tile style editor, which allows you to take an Esri base map and then customize it, as you can see here from the slide. So what I've done is, the original default base map on the left, I've then stripped back the labels in the middle, and on the right-hand side, I've just played around with the colors, changed the font, but it just kind of shows you how much customization you can do with Esri base maps. So base maps essentially are a key ingredient to kind of make your data stand out. So moving on to color. Now, color is a key part, obviously, of every map, and it's a real opportunity to become the most eye-catching element of your visual. Now, it's worth noting there is no right or wrong in which color you choose, but there are definitely considerations on what color you can choose based on the topic that you're trying to present on. Now, if I take this example, I've got a map of religious identities across London, and I absolutely love this map. I think it uses color to really grab the audience's attention. You can see the different pockets of colors of different religions across London, and for me, this is just a really good way to kind of use that color palette to grab the audience's attention. So if we were talking about another topic such as COVID-19, you can see here this map has used a bright red color to kind of convey their choropleth map. And whilst this is the most kind of eye-catching color to choose, we are using red is quite an emotive color and can have connotations of danger and often death. And when we're talking about mapping a human health tragedy, we really have to be considerate about what color we're going to choose to grab the audience's attention. Now, we can take this exact same data, but use a different color scheme. So you can use this blue color scheme here, which is a nice sort of proportional symbol map. And for me, this is just as eye-catching, grabs my attention, but we're not playing on that sensationalist color that we saw in the previous one. So choosing your color definitely requires more thought than just selecting the most eye-catching, brightest. Moving on to composition. So I think the first thing to address is what is it? And this is something I often hear in the world of photography. But actually, composition is the elements on your page and their relationship to each other. So I thought it was right just to use a photo to explain that a little bit. So what you've got here is in the center of the image is the subject, the person sat in the middle of the road reading a cool historical map. And the photographer has really focused on that subject, and that's where your eye is kind of naturally drawn to first. And then as you see the road sort of moves into the distance, it becomes more and more blurred, and then you've got the blurred mountain range in the background. So these are just how the different elements make up that photo. Now, you're probably sat there thinking, okay, how does this relate to a map? Well, I'm going to run you through a quick example here. I'm going to make a couple of key changes to my map just to really emphasize the principles that we've talked about so far and show you how important the different elements can be. So we've got vineyard locations in Bordeaux. It's a pretty plain map at the moment. I'm just going to introduce a base map because we're talking about something that's a very organic kind of topic. I want to add a bit of color and make it feel a bit more like the land. So you can see that's added a little bit of texture there. The symbology is, again, pretty bland, just blue dots. So what I'm going to do is change those to custom symbols and actually change them to a picture of a grape, which then gives it a bit of depth and makes it a bit more relevant when we're talking about vineyards. So the final change I want to make is adding an area of interest. Now, what this does is when you open this map for the first time, your eye is naturally drawn to that area of interest, and that is the real focus point on the map. Now, what I could have done is crop the map completely just to that area, but actually the surrounding information still provides context, and it's equivalent to the blurred mountain range in that photo I showed you previously. So I think it's important to leave them in, but they're just faded out in the background. So hopefully you can see how changing just a couple of elements on your page really emphasizes the story that you're trying to tell. So the final thing that I want to touch on today is probably the most important principle that impacts all of the other principles that we've talked about, and that is, who is your audience? Now, for me, this is always one of the most important things, and I scribble it down on a Post-it note, stick it on top of your monitor, and it's something you need to constantly remind yourself of when you are in the design process. Now, 9 times out of 10, when you're designing a map, you're designing it for somebody else, and you're designing it for an audience, not for yourself. So when you come to choose and make the cartographic decisions, you really need to be thinking about what the audience wants to see and how they're going to consume that information. So each of the principles that we've talked about so far are really flexible. And as I said, there's no hard and fast rule between them, but actually they're all heavily influenced by who your audience is. So we might be designing a map for a technical audience, and in which case we need that map to be very detail-orientated, and give lots of information. But if we're designing something for the general public, we want that to be easy to consume, quite light touch. So I've got 2 examples here to show that. So the first one is a fairly complicated map. This is a map that I designed for an environmentalist. So as you can see, there's lots of information on this map, a little bit chaotic, but actually for the purpose of the map and that environmentalist, they need to make key decisions based on one single graphic. So this is perfect for them because they can identify different areas that they want to proceed with the work. However, if I put that in front of the general public, I might get a few confused faces because there's too much going on. So I've taken the same data and I've applied the principles I've talked about and just brought it up to a higher level. So you can see here with the same information, this is a much lighter touch map. This is hopefully easier to consume and easier to understand, using the colors to kind of pop the information that I want with that muted base map in the background and just a few minimal labels. So hopefully you can see, how audience is one of the most important features, and it's something that you need to, really consider when designing your maps. So I've given you hopefully a nice introduction to each of the 5 principles. I'm now going to hand over to Balqis, who's going to show you all of those in action. So Balqis.
Fabulous. Thank you, Sam. Okay, today we will be creating a global map of ocean currents and sea surface temperature within the new map viewer, which is available to us via ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. As you can see here, I have preloaded my datasets into the map viewer. And the first dataset that we will be using is a vector field showing us the direction and the magnitude of the ocean currents. And we also have a raster layer showing us the sea surface temperature in Celsius. Both of these datasets are available publicly through Esri's Living Atlas. I will now be going through our 5 key cartographic principles and showing you how we can apply them to this dataset to make our map more impactful. Okay, let's begin. So the first cartographic principle that we should consider is base map. It is really important that your base map serves the purpose of your map. Today, I want to use a firefly cartographic style. This means that the underlying base map will be dark in color and that the data that sits atop it will be bright and will have a glow-like effect applied to it. Within the Living Atlas, we have multiple dark base maps available to use straight away, such as the dark gray canvas base map. However, it would be great if we could further tailor our base map towards our data theme, such as our marine theme dataset. We could create a dark blue base map. And as Sam mentioned before, we can customize existing Esri base map templates using the ArcGIS Vector Tile Style Editor. The Vector Tile Style Editor was first introduced in 2018 and is available to anyone with an ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise account. As you can see here, we have a pop-up window that shows us all the available base map templates that we can customize. And when choosing a base map template, we need to consider our next cartographic principle, which is simplicity. It's really crucial that our base map is as simple as possible with the relevant map components. This is so that when we add our data atop it, our overall map won't look too cluttered. So our map purpose is not for navigation, and it is ocean-based, so we don't require any layers showing us roads, land uses, or buildings. Today, we will be customizing the Human Geography Dark Base Map. And when we open this map within the map viewer, within the Vector Tile Style Editor, we can see here that we have only 2 layers, a layer for the land and a layer for the marine area. And using the out-of-the-box tools within the Vector Tile Style Editor, I can quickly customize and change the color of both layers, such as using the color picker or by typing in a specific hex code that I want. Let's rename our base map to something we can recognize later on, such as dark blue, and hit Save. Once we've saved our base map within the Vector Tile Style Editor, we can move back to our map viewer and search for our layer within our contents. As you can see here, our dark blue base map is available to be added into the map viewer. Okay, as our map is a global map, we may want to add labels of the continents for easy identification. We can configure labels within the Vector Tile Style Editor itself, but we have more label configurations within the map viewer. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to search for a layer of the world's continents within the Living Atlas and add that to my map. Let's style this layer to match that of our base map. I'm going to type in the hex code to match my land and turn off my outlines and turn off any pop-ups configured within this layer. Okay, now we are ready to configure the labels. Within Map Viewer, we have the option to add multiple label classes, multiple label styles, and map filters. We also have the option to add different labels to appear at different visible scales. These configurations are exclusive to the new Map Viewer and are not available in the classic version. So when we add our label class, the default label that appears is the name of our continents, which is great because that's what we want. But if you would like to change it, we can click on the drop-down and select a different field. I could add a secondary label class, but again, let's consider simplicity. Let's not add any unnecessary labels. Moving towards label styles, you can see here that we have a wide range of fonts to choose from. We can change the label size, its color, and its halo color. Again, exclusive to the new map viewer, we have the offset tool. Okay, now let's consider our next cartographic principle, which is color, and turn on our seawater temperature layer. As I mentioned before, our seawater temperature layer is in the form of a raster dataset. And within the new map viewer, we have two options of styles for raster datasets, the stretch and the classify. We will be sticking with the stretch style. We also have a wide range of color schemes to choose from. And when choosing a color scheme, it is really important to think about the data that your raster layer is showing. Again, we are showing temperature, so we can divide our dataset into two extremes, hot and cold. Thus, it is suitable for us to use a diverging color scheme, such as the red to blue diverging. This allows the audience of our map to easily identify which areas are hotter and colder in relation to each other. Colder areas appear bluer, while the hotter areas appear redder. We also have the effects toolbar, again exclusive to the map viewer, where we can add multiple different effects to our dataset. Let's go ahead and turn on the saturation effect and increase the strength to make it more eye-catching. Let's now consider our next cartographic principle, which is the audience. Right now, we have the ocean current vectors in the form of vector arrows. If our target audience for this map were for specialists in a print in a journal article or an academic conference, this current map style would be suitable. However, as we are non-specialists and it is in the form of a web map, we can add a bit more stylistic flair to our data. And we can do so by animating the flow of our vector fields. The flow renderer was first introduced early March this year and is one of the latest updates within the map viewer. We have the option to change the color of our flow lines, increase the relative speed, the density, the length, and the width of our flow lines. By animating motion, we can better visualize any changes to our target audience more efficiently. Finally, let's consider our last cartographic principle, which is composition. As Sam mentioned before, composition is how our layers interact with each other. We currently have our ocean current vector layer sitting atop our seawater temperature layer. But to better visualize our dataset, it would be best if we could combine these two layers together to show one visualization. And we can do so using the blending modes. Layer blending is a common feature in graphic design software and was first introduced into Map Viewer in 2020. And you can find the blending modes under the Properties toolbar under Appearance. However, I only want the blending modes to apply to my ocean current vector layer and my sea temperature layer. Therefore, I must now group these two datasets together. Otherwise, the blending modes will apply to the base map. The blending mode I want to apply is the source atop blending mode. This means it draws the layer that it is applied to where it overlaps with the underlying dataset. So in this case, the seawater temperature layer will only be drawn where it overlaps with my ocean current vector layer. So let's go ahead and apply that. We have now combined the two datasets together. To further make our map pop, let's add an effect to our ocean current vector layer. Let's turn on bloom, increase its strength, and decrease the radius. And there we have it. We have created a stunning visualization of ocean currents and sea surface temperature. We hope that this session has given you some insights on how you can use the 5 key principles to further enhance your cartography. Thank you for listening and happy map making.